To start the interview, please tell us your name.
My name is Susan Phillips Plese.
Okay. What was your first contact with Manchester Community College?
Oh, Chuck was hired in 1969 to teach, or to actually start a theater program. And I remember I came up with him. We had not yet been married, but we were planning to get married. So I came up with him to see our potential new home. And Bob Bridgetson interviewed him. That's another funny story, but that's somebody else's. And took us out for lunch and then back to his home. And his last child was just a little toddler running around, and they gave us tea and things. And Bob turned to me and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm an English teacher." At that time, I did have a degree in English, and had taught as a sub in the public schools in New Jersey, but had no experience teaching college, and I did not have a master's. He said, "Oh, would you like to teach English?" So I did, and I taught part-time English and then public speaking for, I don't know how, I was hired in 1989, so from 69 to 89 I taught part-time, 1 or 2 courses a semester. And at the same time I started writing for newspapers in the 70s, and so got my newspaper experience there.
So you had 20 years as an adjunct,
Yeah.
during which you were also doing journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1989 you got hired full-time?
Yes, I was hired just before Christmas, so I started in the spring of 90.
Do you remember who was on your search committee?
I know you were in my search committee. I remember I was really nervous because I had to present a lesson, and I did something on style, on the style book, and how consistency is important when reporting. I do remember that. I do remember being very nervous. And then when I got the job, Jonathan called me early one morning and asked if I would take the job, and I didn't want it because I was so happy as editor of Hartford Woman. And I'm very fortunate I took the job because Hartford Woman folded a year after I left. And now I have, I got tenure, I got promotions, I have a pension big enough to feed a cat for a month, and health care.
Now, when you began as an adjunct, where was the college located?
Well, I taught my first class was in the high school, in an upper classroom.
In Manchester?
In Manchester, yeah. And I remember being shocked because when I handed papers back to students, this was an English class, nobody ran after me. I didn't have to run out of the classroom because my experience in Newark, New Jersey in the 60s during the race riots was completely different. I had to run out of my classroom, literally run out of my classroom. So this was easy.
So this had been about 1969
It was 69, yeah.
What were the students like back then?
They were all older than I. And I remember, I was like 22. I remember asking them to call me by my first name because I couldn't refer to a 60-year-old man as Joe when he was calling me Professor Plese or Mrs. Plese. So I carried that with me. I didn't feel there was any disrespect, and many students couldn't do it. They would call me Professor even before I was, and I just felt more comfortable like that.
Now, that time was also a period of social upheaval,
Yeah.
protests against the Vietnam War. Did you see any of that at the college?
No, I didn't, because again, I was part-time. I taught mostly at night because we started having children, and we would try to Chuck and I would try to make our schedules so that one would be home and one would be working. So I didn't see any evidence of that at all.
Okay. Now, you were the faculty advisor to the student newspaper. Mm-hmm. Can you recall any humorous stories concerning the newspaper?
That was my favorite job of all times at the college. I had so much fun. I hated to get paid for it. It was really, really hard work, but I had some of the greatest students. It was very difficult because this is a 2-year college, and every semester I had a turnover. So every semester I'm going to worry who's going to write, who's going to edit, who's going to be there, and make a commitment, because it is a huge commitment. But I remember the first weekend I went in for production. Frank Zolo was one of the editors, but there was another young man, I can't remember his name, but they were both funny. They didn't know anything about writing or journalism, but they were so eager, and they were like puppies, listening to me, and we just had a wonderful time. And I taught them by, just let them go, and then went back and would say, this is why you don't do this, or this is why this is inappropriate, or this is what you need to know about whatever. And from then, I had a cast of characters that so diverse, you could not possibly imagine. My favorite time was really with Lisa Latendra and Lauren Incognito. Lisa, by the way, was a graduate of MCC, and she gave the convocation address one year, I remember. But we had and Aisha Jones was one of the writers, and I remember Grace Scolo's office was right next to the Livewire office. And the kids were wonderful when I was around. They were, we'd laugh a lot and joke, but they would, apparently they had rubber darts. And when I wasn't around, they'd be throwing rubber darts at the wall and making a lot of noise. And every time I'd come in, I'd walk past Grace's office and she'd go, I'd say, what are you doing? We're just throwing rubber darts. So, tell them to calm down. But, they had, both Lauren and Lisa, and Aisha too, had wonderful senses of humor. And I remember one time we did a mock front page. We had interviewed Mike DeRamo for something, I don't remember what it was. And he said something that, just stood out as being really inappropriate or really stupid. And Mike is not. So we took it out of context and used it as a banner, as a front page about 36-point type, and photocopied it. And I said, Mike, look, you're on the front page of the paper with this stupid quote that I wish I could remember. He said, oh. And his face dropped. He said, you are kidding me, right? Of course they were, but it was so much fun to get back at him because he was always, you know what a sense of humor he has, and he was always digging, in the good way. And the other mock headline we did, the kids did it. I wasn't there, but it was when we broke ground for the new campus. I don't think it wasn't the Low Building, it was the new campus. And the kids went in, we had big stories about it, and they went in and did another mock headline, 36-point type in. This is what I don't know if you'll have to cut. It said, dickheads dig dirt. I still have the paper. Of course, that was not the headline we used. So we had a wonderful time. We worked weekends. We had to. The kids would come in their pajamas, literally, and work all day, all night. We went all night Friday until early Monday morning. We were in that office during production weeks.
On some campuses, the student newspaper sometimes runs afoul of the administration.
Yeah.
If they publish something that's critical.
Yeah.
Was there ever a situation like that?
Yes, a couple of times. And it was under Jonathan Dobby. And he did call me a couple of times. And I tried to explain that the student newspaper is not a PR vehicle for the college. They have their own PR vehicles. But this is an attempt to report honestly and factually and without bias, both sides, 3 sides, 10 sides of a story. And he let us go after that. But it was uncomfortable. And I know there were times when the students were upset about something and wanted to write something really just outrageous. And I said, just calm down now. Think about it. How can you say it in an acceptable way? As an argument, not as a vendetta.
You mentioned one of your colleagues, Michael DeRamo. Can you think of some other people you worked with at the college who were particularly helpful, memorable, interesting?
Oh, Mara and Ed Hogan And you, of course. I mean, you hired me, you got me. I remember when I first came, our offices were together, and I was so scared. I was scared out of my mind because I had taught college for 20 years, but I had never been full-time. And I was assigned 4 courses, so I had 4 preps, and 2 of the courses, public relations and feature writing, public relations and journalism, I had never taught before, and had never even seen the books that had been chosen by the person before me. So I was scared to death. In addition, I was still working at Harvard Woman with permission of publisher there and the school here. I kept both jobs for 6 months because we were in the middle of a complete design makeover at the magazine, and I didn't want to leave. So I was really scared, and I only had 2 weeks to prepare for these 4 courses. And I remember you stopping by my office one time, and I was there, marking papers and looking very agitated. And you said, take it easy, take it easy. It's hard your first year. And I remember saying the same thing to Susan Clausen Sullivan because she seemed to look just like I looked that first year. And I said, it gets better. It gets better. It's hard and it's scary, but it gets better.
So you were here for well over 30 years. What changes did you see over that time period?
Oh, technology has got to be the biggest. I saw a difference in the students. When I first started, most were older. We tend now to get as many, if not more, students who are straight from high school, and I didn't see that in in the 70s. I didn't see that at all. Virtually all of my students were older than I. So there's a big difference there. The students who come in now are, I can't say all of them, but many are immature and maybe not ready for college. I did tell one student, I asked for a conference with him, and because he just wasn't doing anything. And I finally said, I don't think you're ready for college. I think maybe you should go out and get a job and do some thinking and growing up. He said, okay. He left. And years later, I called him because he was a subject for an interview. I didn't even recognize his name. He said, you're the one who told me to quit college. He said, I quit for a year. I went back, and he had his master's degree. So that was...
Are there any other students who stand out in your mind?
Oh, so many. I mean, I wrote down, I just got, I should have brought it with me, a student in the last class I taught. It was a public speaking course. His name was Carlton Bryant, and he was not an exceptional student, but so determined and so exacting and asking questions all the time. So I worked with him, and at close to the end of the semester, I said, what are you doing now? He said, well, I'm working on my associates. I said, how many credits do you have? He had about 100 credits. And he was going to get his associates, then go to a 4-year university, and then on from there. I said, have you heard of Charter Oak? He said, no. I just got his graduation picture. He just graduated from Charter Oak, and he's working on his MBA. He started his MBA in February. Just a wonderful student. And so many came with nothing and wanted only to, they were like sponges. I loved it because they wanted so much to learn something. John Schutz, a very early student, I think he's now living in Germany, and I think his mother was active in the older adults or whatever it was then. Lisa Latendra and Lauren Incognito and Aisha. Kim Soper was one of my students, and she works for the JI. She's been working there for a long time. And Sean Courchain was in one of my early classes. And the first day of class, I always said, how many of you here want to be journalists? And 3 people raised their hand, all men. And I said, what do you want to specialize in? And all 3 said sports. I said, why sports? And it wasn't Sean, but somebody else said, so I can sit in the press booth and get lots to eat. I said, well, that's not really what this is all about, but okay. And Sean, I really didn't think was serious, but he's still writing for The Current, and I got fired after 17 years. So there's something to be said about the training they get here.
What would you point to as your greatest accomplishments during your time at MCC?
I think the influence I had on young journalists, because I did propose and design the course in media ethics and law, because frankly I was scared. I was sending kids out with 6 months of journalism and maybe 2 weeks devoted to ethics and law. And I thought, they're going to get themselves in big trouble. And I always felt when I was teaching a class and a student got a grade, my name was attached to that. It's like signing your painting or something, that I'd hate to have someone say, who taught you? You know? So I think that was my biggest contribution, was designing and teaching that class. And you were the one, I think, who made it now a requirement.
Is there anything you would change about your career at the college?
I never thought about that. Maybe I should have waited a little longer to leave, but I'm not sorry I left what I did, because I left not feeling like I was pushed out or had to leave. I took the golden handshake, or the whatever you want to call it. Quite honestly, I was afraid of, it was John Rowland's tenure then as governor, and I was afraid that because of his disdain for state workers, he would take our pensions and our health care away from us, and that was a driving reason. But other than that, I don't think I tried my best. I did my best, and I loved my students. We did have behavior problems in the classroom, as you well know, but the majority still keep in touch with me. One of my students, George Jones, I had probably 12, 14 years ago, and when you're teaching, you toss anecdotes around. You don't really remember what you said. But he had moved to New Jersey, and when my undergrad institution, Uppsala College, folded, he sent me, I wrote an obituary for it, and it appeared somehow in the New Jersey papers, and he saw it and sent it to me saying, I don't think you remember me, but I did. And a couple of months ago, he called. He's back in Connecticut, and he wants to be a writer. He has published his first piece and just wanted to talk about how he should go about it and what he should do. So that's, that they're nice things. And I have students calling me all the time saying, help, I have to write an obit. Where do I start? Or something like that. So it's fun.
If you were talking to someone who was just hired to begin his or her career at the college, teaching career, what advice would you give that person?
Depends on what they're teaching. I think I've always thought that the most important attitude or trait a student can have is curiosity. So I would say to a teacher, indulge curiosity. If they don't know something, tell them to go find it. Be patient, because they don't grow up as fast as we did, or maybe I'm just kidding. But they are immature. They need discipline. I would say to a teacher, don't back down. Demand the best, and you get the best they're capable of doing. If you allow them any slack, they take it. My rule was deadlines are absolute and non-negotiable. And I would not take a late paper, even an hour late. That was it. It's a deadline. That means deadline. That's it. Although one time I had two kids, another anecdote, two kids who didn't turn up after spring break, and they had a major paper due. They came back the week after that. It was once a week class. And they handed in their papers. I said, I don't take late papers. And, I was just laughing, shrugging. And the kid said, well, we were in jail. I said, you were in jail? What were you doing in jail? He said, we went to Florida for spring break, and we were tooling around in our pickup truck, and we found an alligator, so we put it in the back of the truck, and the police arrested us for poaching. So what do you think? Did I take the papers? Yeah, it was a good story. I took the papers. And I had a kid who said, a truck ran over his journal. I said, yeah, right. The next week he came in with it, and sure enough, there were huge tire tracks. And either he was truthful or he went to a lot of trouble to find a truck. They're funny.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that my colleagues here were wonderful. I loved teaching here. I particularly loved the old campus, the little community down there, because we would just get together in the hallways and we'd laugh and we'd tell jokes and we'd in the book I'm writing, I remember I locked myself out of my office as usual, and Mike DeRamo was there. So your office was open, or you were there, and he got up on the desk and he vaulted over that space between the petitions and opened my door. And I can't tell you how many times people did that. And everybody would stand around and applaud, and we were serious about what we did, but we just had so much fun doing it, and everybody was pulling for everybody else. Toby Tamarkin was the best cheerleader we ever had. She would, the first semester they promised they wouldn't evaluate me because I was working on 2 jobs, but about 4 weeks into the semester, there she was in my classroom, and she's sitting there like this, grinning her head off. And I thought, okay, I can do this. She's on my side. So.
Did you ever attend the Wednesday afternoon happy hours?
Oh, sure, yeah. Everybody dropped in. I often had classes that went until 3 or a quarter after, whatever, and then we usually had meetings afterward. But I think everybody at least stopped in. I'm trying to get a hold of Lois to write something about that, because that was just, it was so much fun, just a place to sit and chat and talk with your colleagues, and it doesn't seem like we had that here. Yeah, but it's different because we are separated.
Anything else? Chuck, can
You
you?
want to talk about theater at all?
Yeah, I did teach theater, but I realized that I wasn't good teaching acting. I could teach theater, but not acting, even though I was an actor. So I didn't like that. But I did bring one-act play competition to the college. I don't even remember what year it was, but we had 4 or 5 high schools participating. Again, one-act plays. I managed to get Greg Lemming, who then was a dramaturge at Hartford Stage, to serve as one of the judges. And it was really a wonderful, it was in the program center. It was a wonderful event. I also did I directed a one-act one time, a long time ago. That was the extent of I did act in Theater 3, which was Chuck's professional program, summer program that he introduced. But that was the extent of the theater.
Anything funny about the Runner's Tongues?
No, it doesn't translate well.
Okay.
I guess more than anything, I just appreciated what I had here, and I loved my students. And most of them are, not most, but a lot are still in contact. And we see each other. Laura and Lisa are both mothers. Lauren has twin boys and a little girl. And we get together, and it's just very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.